We continue now at the top of Daf Tazayin Amid Beis Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 16b. On the previous summer, there was a machlokas tanoim by mefagel bechatzi mater. Let's say there's a pigul intention only by a half a mater. For example, let's say there's a pigul intention by the burning of the kometz and not the burning of the lavona. That's a half a mater. Is it pigul or not? Rabbi Meir says mefaglin bechatzi mater, and it is pigul. And the chachamim say it is not pigul in such a situation because, again, according to the chachamim, ein mefaglin bechatzi mater. And on the previous summer, Rav said that in a situation where there be a pigul intention in the first of the two matirin, and then the person is silent in terms of the second of the two matirin, so then we actually say kol ha'osa al das rishon hu osa, and everybody agrees, even the chachamim agree that it is pigul, because even the second matir, it's just a continuation of that first pigul intention. And the Gemara in the previous Amud was in the middle of asking a question from a brisa which talks about the inner chatos, where there's multiple applications of blood, so it's a case of chatzi matir potentially, and over there also there was a machlokas tanoim, and that was even in a situation where there was an intention of pigul at the first application of blood. Still there was a machlokas tanoim. Apparently we don't say kol ha'osa al das rishon hu osa. And on the previous summit, Rav Ashi answered that it's not talking where there was a pigul intention just the first time. It was the first and the second time, and then there was silence. The fact that it was the first and second time that there was a spoken intention of pigul, that shows that if there's no intention spoken out, we do not say kol ha'osa al das rishon hu osa, and that would answer the question, because in this particular brisa, we have reason not to say, specifically not to say kol ha'osa al das rishon hu osa. But the Gemara continues and questions this answer, v'ha bein katani, but the language of the brisa is bein, meaning, as Rashi explains, v'ha bein katani demashma ba'achas v'lo b'shtayim. It sounds like he's only having that intention in the first of the applications and not by the first two, just by the language of the brisa. And the Gemara says kasha. The Gemara leaves that as a difficulty. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Mar, the master said, we just said in the brisa above, Rabbi Meir says, pigul v'chayav and olav kares, again in a situation of multiple applications of the bloods, like the inner carbon chatos, it is pigul if there's an intention in just one of those applications, and we say that there's a liability of kares, because again, according to Rabbi Meir, mefaglin bechatzi matir. But the Gemara says, michti, let us see, kares lo mechayev at sheyikruvu kol ha'matir, and the general halacha is, there's no liability to kares unless all of the matirin are brought. In other words, there has to be an intention of pigul, but everything else essentially has to be completed properly. The Yomar Mar, as the master said, Yeirotze, it says it's going to be accepted. K'hartzoas kosher, k'hartzoas pasul, the same way it's accepted when it's kosher, it has to be accepted when it's pasul, when it's disqualified. Mahartzoas kosher, just like when it's kosher and accepted, ad sheyikruvu kol hamatirin, all of the permitters of the carbon have to be offered. Af hartzoas pasul, so too when it's offered in disqualification, ad sheyikruvu kol hamatirin, but all of the permitters have to be offered. And the point is, v'hayin, in this situation, kevan dechashe ba bifnim, once he has a wrong intention inside, let's say in the Kodesh Kodashim, in the case of Yom Kippur, so pasli, so now he's now disqualified it. And kimadi behechol, so any sprinklings he now does in the hechol, maya ba'alma hu dekamadi, he's just sprinkling water, meaning he's just sprinkling, it's like doing nothing, and therefore he really hasn't finished offering all of the matirin. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rabba says, mashkachas lo, we can answer this question in the following scenario, ba'arba parim, with 4 bulls, v'arba seirim, and 4 he-goats, we'll see Rashi in a moment. And Rava says, afilu tema par echad v'soar echad, you could say it's all being done with 1 bull and 1 he-goat. The point over here is, lefagule miratze, even though it's disqualified, but we do say that these applications are accepted in terms of creating pigul. As long as everything else is done correctly, then again, the pigul intention will go through, so to speak, and the offering will essentially be pigul. And Rashi explains, mashkachas lo, again, Rabba's answer, we can find in mefagli kulu that it's entirely pigul, b'dalid parim, b'dalid seirim, a situation of 4 bulls and 4 he-goats, par v'soar pnim. What happened is, there's a bull and he-goat inside, v'chishev olav, and he has an intention of pigul, v'nishpach hadam, and then the blood spills out, la'achar hazos pnim, after the sprinklings inside are done, v'hevi par v'soar echad l'hechol, so he brings a new par and soar for the hechol, v'yechad l'mizbeach l'sheva hazos, and then another one for the mizbeach for its 7 hazos, v'chein l'karnos to v'chol echad, and then also for the corners, karvu matirin, so then the matirin entirely were brought to hakulam kasherim, because each set is entirely kosher. Vein sarach lachzor lahazos min hasheni b'fnim, you don't have to go ahead and re-sprinkle from the second one inside. Uv'makam shaposek humaschel, he just begins from wherever he left off. Kedamrinan b'meseches yuma b'perakot siulo, like we say in Meseches yuma b'perakot siulo and perakot siulo. And so therefore, with that scenario, we can have a case where it's karvu kol hamatirin, and then the other answer of the Gemara was Rava's answer, lefigul meratze, even if the subsequent applications of dam are technically puzzle, but they are accepted as far as pigul is concerned. Le'inyan kain hein chashuvos, as far as that they're concerned, they are considered, they are accepted, shelo yotzimi de pigul, they don't leave in terms of the status of pigul. And the Gemara continues, our boyim v'shalosh, 43 of Yom Kippur, v'atanya, but didn't we learn in another brayso, our boyim v'sheva, that it's actually 47 applications of blood when it comes to Yom Kippur. And the Gemara says to that, Lokash, it's not difficult. Hakaman do amar ma'arvin l'kranos, one brayso is following the one who says that ma'arvin l'kranos, we mix the blood for the corners, v'hakaman do amar ein ma'arvin, the other one is according to the one who says we don't mix. But the Gemara continues and asks, v'atanya our boyim u'shmona, but there's another brayso that has 48, and the Gemara says to that, Lokash, that's not difficult. Hakaman damar shirayim ma'akvin. This is according to the one who says the pouring of the remnant blood is required. That's an additional application. Hakaman damar shirayim lo ma'akvin. The other one follows the opinion that says the remnant blood being poured out is not ma'akev, and therefore you don't have that additional application. Rashi explains ma'orvin lekronos. We mix for the applications to the corner plugsi v'perakotziulo. That's a machlokas in perakotziulo. And Rashi continues, Hadakatani Mem Gimel, the one that says 43 applications, Command Amr Ma'orvin Dam Par Visor B'Shas Arba Matanos. That's according to the one who says the blood of the Par and Sor are mixed by the 4 applications, the Karnos to Mizbeach Hapnimi of the inner Mizbeach corners. Hadakatani Mem Zayin, the one that says 47, Command Amr Mikol Echad Nos and Dal Matanos. That's according to the one who says from each blood, we do 4 Vayasr Luhudalit. So you have an extra 4 applications. And Shirayim, in terms of pouring the remnant blood, shall kol ha'azos, that's the remnant blood of all the sprinklings, ma'akvi, that is required in lo shafchan al yesod mizbeach achitzon, if it's not poured by the base of the outer mizbeach, v'havel hu memches, and that would be the 48th. And the Gemara continues at the Tudat, boy luhu, they had the following question, pigel beholacha ma'u, if he has an intention of pigel by the conveying of the komets to the mizbeach, what's the halacha? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, holacha kekmitza, holacha, the conveying is the same as the kmitza, just like by the kmitza it's not called a half a matir, it is pigel, so too by holacha. Reish Lakish Amar holacha ka'aktara, but Reish Lakish says the conveying is like the burning, and therefore it's considered a half a matir. And the Gemara continues, Bishlama l'Reish Lakish. Now I understand, according to Reish Lakish, Ikonami holacha de lavona, there is the conveying of the lavona as well. It makes sense that it would be a half a matir. Elul Rabbi Yochanan my time, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, what is the reason? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Kasav Rabbi Yochanan holds, Kol avoda she'ina materes, any avoda that does not permit, that it itself does not permit, avoda chashuvahi lefagel ole b'fnei atzma, that's considered an important avoda on its own, that the pigel can be created independently with that avoda. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Abai said to him, Hare shchitas echad min hakvasim, well, what about slaughtering one of the lambs of Shavuos? The avoda she'ena matirasa, that's an avoda she'ena matirasa. Upligi, and yet they still argue in that situation. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Shachar echad min hakvasim, if he slaughters one of the lambs, lechol shtei chalos lamachar, to eat the 2 loaves tomorrow. Hikter echad min habazichin, he burns one of the bazichin by the lechem aponim, lechol shnei starim lamachar, to eat from the 2 arrangements of the bread tomorrow. Rabbi Meir Omer pigel v'chayavin olav kares. Rabbi Meir says it's pigel and there's a liability to kares. V'chachamim Omer mein bo kares achi yefagel b'chol hamatir, and the chachamim say there's no kares unless it's pigel in the entire matir. And the Gemara continues, Amarle said to me, Savrid lechem b'tanor kadosh, do you think that the lechem is kadosh, is sanctified in the oven? Shchitas kevasim mekad shalei, it's the slaughtering of the lambs that actually sanctifies the bread. V'habol kadosh, and that which comes to sanctify, kibol hater dami, is the same as that which comes to permit. And Rashi explains, Pigel b'holacha, komets, again, he has a pigel intention by the holacha of the komets. What's the halacha? Mihave chatzi avoda, do we say that is considered to be a half avoda? Pligi rabbanan at she'efagel b'chol hamatir, and the rabbanan would argue, because you have to have pigel in the whole matir, kilomar af b'holachas levona, meaning also by the conveying of the levona, o lo pligi, or would they not argue? Kekmitza, it's the same as kmitza, the have avoda shleima, kmitza is considered a full avoda, the ein kmitza b'levona, there is no taking of a fistful by the levona. The other opinion is kehaktar, it's like burning or pligi, and there is a machlokis. And then the Gemara said, kol avoda she'ena materes, if you have an avoda that's not a matir, meaning, kagon holacha de lo ma'akva, that would mean like holacha, which is not required. The efshar lahoshid zelazeh, one, they could pass it one to the next person, you don't technically need a holacha, so chashuva lefagel ole b'fnei atzma, it's important enough that it's pigel independently. The lekal amemer ad she'efagel b'chol hamatir, you can't say you have to do pigel in the whole matir. The whole lav matir, it's not really a matir, matter, vein koach la'acheres la'akif, another matter is not able to hold it back. Shchitasa eina materes, and also the slaughtering, again talking about the lambs, it's not a matter lo basar v'lo emurin, it's not mattering the meat or the sacrificial portions, dezrika matirasan, it's the throwing of the blood that is the matir. And then the Gemara said that if it's lekadish, if it sanctifies, kibala hatir dami, that's the same as permitting uva'inon atshi yafagel b'chol matir, and then we would require the pigul in the entire matir. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rav Shimi Barashi. Rav Shimi Barashi asks a question from the following brisa. This brisa is dealing with the slaughter of the Karban Pesach. Acherim omrim, others say, hiktim mulim la'arelim kosher. If he first has intention when he's slaughtering the Karban Pesach for those who have bris milah, then he has intention for arelim, those who are uncircumcised, then it's kosher. And hiktim arelim lemulim pasul. But if he first has intention for the arelim, and then those who have bris milah, then it's pasul, then it is disqualified. The Acherim are arguing with another Tana. The other Tana holds that it's kosher in all situations. And the Gemara now continues and explains, V'kaim alon, we've established the v'chatzi mater pligi. This is an example of chatzi mater, just like we have a machlokas by whether there's pigul b'chatzi mater. This also is a situation of chatzi mater, and that's why the Acherim are saying pasul. That's why they're saying disqualified over here. And Rashi explains, Hiktim mulim la'arelim b'shchitas Pesach Mayri. We're talking here about the slaughter of the Karban Pesach. To shachat simin rishon lemulim. The first simin is slaughtered, that's cut lemulim with the intention that it's for those who have bris milah, that's a kosher intention. And simin sheni, then the second simin in the throat, la'arelim, that the intention is for arelim, for those who are uncircumcised, which is a bad intention. And again, according to the Acherim, we say in a situation where the arelim intention is first, then we say pasul. V'kaim alon beperak tamin nishchat b'Meseches Psachim. We establish in perak tamin nishchat and Meseches Psachim again that the machlokas is exactly about chatzi matir. And the point over here is alma. We see ba'avoda she'ena materes v'lo mekadeshes. Right now, the Gemara is assuming that the slaughter of the Karban Pesach is an avoda that is not a matir and it's not a mekadeshes. It doesn't sanctify. Kagon hacha, like over here, the leko lechem. There is no bread to skadesh le'shchita that the shchita is sanctifying. And pligi nami rabbanon, and yet the rabbanon argue over here as well. In other words, we see over here as well, there's a concept that it's considered chatzi matir, and therefore we would say again that there's a machlokas tanoim whether or not that creates that bad intention in chatzi matir, creates a disqualification. And so therefore this is a question on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan again said holacha kekmitza, when you have an avoda like holacha, the conveying of the komets to the mizbeach, which is not a matir and not a mekadesh, so then we say everybody agrees that's not considered to be chatzi matir, everybody agrees that a bad intention will in fact disqualify, and so there should not be a machlokas over here by the slaughter of the Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Lei said to him, Misavre dam b'tzavor behema kadosh. Do you think that the blood is kadosh in the neck of the animal? Dam sakin mekad shalei. It's actually the knife. When the knife does the shchita, that's what actually is mekadesh, sanctifies the blood. And as we just said above, habola kadesh kibola hatir dami. If something sanctifies, it's the same as lahatir, and so therefore this is considered to be a situation of chatzi matir, and that's why there is a machlokas tanoim in this situation. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following brisa. This brisa was quoted earlier, and this is going to be a proof to Rabbi Yochanan that again by the hiluch there is pigul. The brisa says, B'amed devarim amurim, when is this true? B'kmitza v'matan kli u'v'hiluch. By kmitza, matan kli, and hiluch, there is pigul, and everybody agrees there's pigul in such situations. It's not considered chatzi matir, and it clearly says hiluch. My lav hiluch daktar. Isn't this talking about conveying it in order to burn it on the mizbeach? You're taking it to the mizbeach. And the Gemara says not necessarily lo, no, hiluch de matan kli. It might be talking about conveying it in order to put it in the vessel. Maybe the vessel where you're going to put the komets is not nearby. It has to be walked over to that vessel. The Gemara says, Hihachi, if so, b'matan kli uvehiluch. Why does it say b'matan kli uvehiluch? It sounds like the conveying is after it's in the vessel. Behiluch uvematan kli mi boile. It should say the conveying and then placing it in the vessel, since we're talking about conveying, walking it over to the kli. And the Gemara continues and answers, Halo kasha, that's not difficult. Tani hachi, just teach the brisa that way. Change the words of the brisa, and instead it should say behiluch uvematan kli. But the Gemara still asks, Bolo lahaktara, then the Brisa says that when it comes to haktara, so there again, there is a machlokas, because that is a situation of chatzi matir. But according to this answer, the holacha, the conveying to the mizbeach, is the same thing. So Bolo laholacha mi boile. It should have said Bolo laholacha, that by the conveying to the mizbeach, again, we have the same issue of chatzi matir. The Gemara says, halokasha, that's not difficult. Kevan de holacha tzorech haktara. Since holacha is necessary for haktara, it's all one thing. Kari lo haktara, so the Brisa is just referring to it as haktara. The Brisa is referring to it as burning. But the Gemara continues and asks, then the Brisa goes on to have a case where the kometz is burned on the mizbeach b'shtika in silence with no particular intention. But why talk about that case? Holach mi boile. Again, according to this answer, by holacha, by the conveying to the mizbeach, it's exactly the same. So the Brisa should bring a case like that. And the Gemara says kasha. The Gemara leaves that as a difficulty. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Hiktir shum lechol shum. Let's say by the burning of the kometz, he burns a small amount of it. A shumshum is the size of a sesame, and he burns that small amount with the intention of eating from the remainder of that small amount outside of the proper time. And he does that for the whole kmitza, and he does that for the lavona, the frankincense as well. Ad shakola kometz kul, and he does that until the kometz is entirely burned on the mizbeach. So the point over here is that he has a machsheves pigul, he has an intention of pigul a little bit at a time. So on that we have a three-way machlokas amoroim, Rav Chisda, Rav Hamnun, and Rav Sheshes. It's a machlokas Rav Chisda, Rav Hamnun, and Rav Sheshes. Chadomar pigul, one says it's pigul. V'chadomar posel, one says it is disqualified in that case, but it's not considered to be pigul. There's no kares. V'chadomar kosher, and finally the last opinion is that it's kosher. That's not a disqualifying intention at all. And the Gemara continues and says, Leima man damar pigul k'Rebbi Meir. Let us say the one that says pigul is following Rebbi Meir, that mefaglin b'chatzi matir. This would be the same thing as chatzi matir over here, because he's just doing a little at a time. Uman damar posel k'Rabbanan, the one who says posel, that's like the Rabbanan. Again, the Rabbanan say by chatzi matir, even though it's not considered to be pigul, but it is considered posel, it's disqualified. Uman damar kosher k'Rebbi, and the one who says kosher is like Rebbi. Rebbi was brought previously. And Rebbe was dealing specifically with the shtei halechem. If one slaughters one of the lambs of the shtei halechem with the intention of pigul on one of the loaves, and then the other one with the intention of pigul on the other loaf, so Rebbe over there said kosher, and so that would be the same over here. Here also we would say kosher. But the Gemara says, Mimai, how do you know that this is related at all to the machlokas tanoim? This is actually separate. Dilma adkan lo kama Rebbe Meir hasa. Maybe Rebbe Meir only said over there that we say mefaglin b'chatzi matir, at least over there was an intention with the proper amount at a time, meaning it was a chatzi matir. He had a pigul intention with the proper amount of the kometz, but it was only chatzi matir because it was not with the lavona, but there was the proper shear. Aval hacha, but over here, delochisha b'shiuro, here the intention is not by the minimum shear, it's a tiny amount at a time, the amount of a shumshum, so low, so therefore Rabbi Meir wouldn't say that. The adkan lo kami rabbanon hasam, and the rabbanon, they only said it over there. Ela delochishev bei bekule matir, there was no pigul intention in the whole matir. It was really a case of chatzi matir. There's just an intention by the kometz and not by the lavona. Aval hacha, but over here, in this case, it's a little at a time, but it accumulates to the entire thing, including both the kometz and the lavona. Techisha be bekule matir, where the intention is the whole matir. Hachanami depagel. It's possible that the rabbanon say it's pigul over here. V'adkan lo kama Rebbe hasam, and Rebbe only said it over there by the shtei halechem. Ela de lo hadar malyo meosa avoda. There, he didn't fill it, so to speak, from that avoda. Aval hacha, but over here, the hadar malyo meosa avoda, where he filled the amount, he filled the requisite amount from that avoda. Hachinami de posel. So then we would say again, even Rebbe would say posel in such a situation. And Rashi explains, the lohadar malya l'shir achila meosa avoda. He didn't fill the minimum amount of achila from that avoda, because the case over there was shachisha bekeves oechad. He had intention by one lamb, uvechalo ha'acheres hishlim zayis, and it was only with the second chala, by the slaughtering of the second lamb, that he finished the kazayis, the minimum shear, for the intention of pigul. V'lo chishav lo ba'oso keves v'lo ba'osa chala. He didn't think in that lamb and in that chala for the amount of a kazayis, and that's why Rebbe over there says kosher. But again, that's not the case over here, because over here the minimum amount was in fact fulfilled, and that minimum amount was fulfilled from that one avoda, so therefore again Rebbe would say posel. And the Gemara continues, Elamando Amar Pigul, rather we say as follows, the one who says Pigul Divrei Hakol, meaning the Amora who says Pigul in this case, when it's the amount of a Shumshum, will be according to all Tanoim, and Mando Amar Pasal Divrei Hakol, the one who says Pasal, is following all Tanoim, and Mando Amar Kosher Divrei Hakol, the one who says Kosher is following all Tanoim, meaning the Machlokas Tanoim is not relevant to the Machlokas Amoroim over here, as the Gemara now explains, Mando Amar Pigul Divrei Hakol, the one who says Pigul is following all Tanoim, because Kosavar, because this Amora holds derech achila bekach v'derech haktara bekach. This is the normal way of eating, and this is the normal way of burning. Again, talking about burning the komets and the levona on the mizbeach, doing it a little at a time, and having these intentions of eating from the carbon a little at a time. That's considered the normal derech, and so therefore it's going to be a case of pigul. Uman damar pasel, and again the one who says disqualified but not pigul divrei hakol, that's following all tanoim, because kasavar, because he holds derech achila bekach. This is the normal way of eating, of consuming from the carbon. Ve'ein derech haktara bekach. However, it is not the normal way of burning it, that it should be a little at a time. V'havoi lo kemincha shelo huktara. So it's like a carbon mincha which wasn't burned properly, and then essentially in that case it's not going to be pigul, but it will be possible, it will be disqualified. And finally, uman damar kosher divrei hakol, the one who says kosher is also following all tanoim. Kasavar derech haktara bekach. He holds that the haktara, the burning, is being done in the normal fashion, so that the haktara is good. However, ve'ein derech achila bekach. However, it's not the normal way of eating to be thinking about eating a little at a time outside of the proper time, and therefore essentially that machshava is not a machshava at all. There was no machshavas pigul, and that's why it is not disqualified, that's why it is kosher. And the Gemara continues at the two dots Amri, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph.